6 feet under your house right now, there is something sitting in the dirt that holds a constant 55 degrees Fahrenheit. And it does not care if it is 105 outside in August or even 20 below in January. It just sits there at 55 day and night, all year round, every year for the rest of your life. And 900 years ago, in a city in the middle of the Iranian desert called Yazd, a group of Persian engineers figured out how to pull that 55 degrees up out of the ground and pipe it into their living rooms. They did it without electricity or a single moving part. They built towers of mud brick that still stand today, and inside those towers, on a summer day when the desert was hitting 115 degrees, the air came out at around 60, a 55-degree drop, with no compressor, no refrigerant, no monthly bill, and no service technician in a branded van pulling into the driveway every August. You can build the modern version of this in your backyard for about $300 in materials and 1 weekend of work. Your own government published the blueprint for it in 1947 in a USDA pamphlet called Farmers Bulletin No. 1918. Then a different group of people quietly made sure that bulletins stopped being reprinted by 1961. Today, in 25 American states, your local building inspector technically cannot approve this system because of bills that were pushed through state legislatures in the last 5 years. And when researchers ran the text of those bills through plagiarism detection software, the results came back nearly word-for-word identical across Utah, Texas, Arizona, and Louisiana. Same paragraphs, different legislators. Coordinated suppression of a 900-year-old cooling method that costs less than 1 month of your electric bill. That is what we are unpacking today. I have spent the last several months going through agricultural extension archives from the 1940s, German architectural papers from the 1890s, and modern peer-reviewed studies from Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Canada. What I am about to show you is not theory. It is engineering that has been continuously running in some Pennsylvania Amish farmhouses since the early 1700s, and it works exactly as well today as it did then. Welcome to Forgotten Home Science, where we dig up the things that textbooks stopped teaching. Okay, let me show you the physics first, because once you understand this part, the rest of the story is going to piss you off. The ground under your feet is not just cold. It is a thermal battery on a 6-month delay. That sentence is going to sound weird, so stay with me, because this is one of the most beautiful pieces of physics most people have never heard. The sun heats the surface of the earth in waves. Summer arrives, the top inch of soil gets cooked. Winter shows up, the same top inch freezes. But here is what almost nobody tells you. That heat does not travel straight down at full strength. It gets weaker as it goes deeper, and it also gets delayed. The science term for this is thermal diffusivity, which is just a fancy way of saying how fast heat moves through soil. For moist dirt, the number is tiny. So tiny that a July heat wave on the surface takes months to push its way down to 4 feet underground. By the time that July warmth actually reaches your pipe, it is already October on the surface and everything has cooled off. The dirt around your buried pipe is running about 6 months behind the weather above it, which means the cool air blowing out of your living room vent on August 15th is not pulling some vague background temperature out of the ground. It is literally pulling this past February's cold up to the surface. 6 months ago, when it was 25 degrees outside and you were paying to heat your house, that cold soaked down into the ground and waited patient, until exactly the moment you needed it again in August. Your backyard is not a freezer, it is a time machine. That is the part the spam channels never explain, because they do not know it themselves. They just say the ground is 55 degrees. Yeah, but why is it 55 degrees on the hottest day of the year? Because the soil holds on to winter for 6 months and quietly hands it back to you in July. Once you see that, you cannot unsee it. Second piece of the physics. Moist soil holds an enormous amount of thermal energy per cubic foot. A trench 60 feet long and 4 feet deep holds enough cool to run a small air conditioner flat out for several hours. And because the system is constantly being refilled by weather that already happened 6 months ago, you cannot drain it dry. The pipe is always getting recharged. One more piece. Wet soil moves heat about 5 times faster than dry soil. So if your lawn gets rain like most American lawns do, your dirt is already conducting heat efficiently. Mother Nature already set the conditions for you. You do not have to do anything, so now you have the picture. 4 feet down, the ground is 55. The ground is delayed by half a year. The thermal mass is huge. The conductivity is decent because your grass gets rain. All you have to do is run a pipe through that dirt, blow your house air through the pipe, and the dirt pulls the heat out before the air reaches your bedroom. That is the whole concept. The Persians did it 900 years ago using clay pipes and water channels they called qanats, which is just the word for underground tunnel. The Romans did it under their villas in cooling cellars they called cryptoporticus. The Koreans built underfloor air channels they called andal for the same purpose 3,000 years ago. The native peoples of the American Southwest built semi-subterranean pit houses on identical physics for 8,000 years. 5 different civilizations, none of them talking to each other, all arrived at the same solution. That should tell you something. Now here is where it gets specifically wild for Americans, because the most important early documentation of this technology in modern construction did not happen in Persia or Rome. It happened on a farm in the Rhine Valley in Germany. In 1897, a German architect named Heinrich Schaller published a technical paper on what he called the Erdkanal, which is the German word for earth channel. Schaller had been studying old German farmhouses that had been continuously occupied since the early 1700s, and he noticed something the original builders had never thought to write down. They had run stone-lined air tunnels through the foundations of those houses to temper the incoming outdoor air. Some of those tunnels had been running for almost 200 years when Schaller studied them, and they still worked. Cool in summer, slightly warmed in winter. The physics he documented in 1897 lines up perfectly with what the Ontario Conservation Centre in Canada measured on instrumented test rigs in 2022. The science did not change. It just got rediscovered. Then something happened that almost nobody talks about. German-speaking settlers from the Rhine Valley emigrated to Pennsylvania in the early 1700s. They brought the building technique with them. Those settlers became the people we now call the Pennsylvania Amish. Today, if you drive through Lancaster County in Pennsylvania, or Holmes County in Ohio, or LaGrange County in Indiana, there are farmhouses still standing with their original clay pipe earth tube systems intact in the foundations. The clay has crumbled in some of them. In others, the pipe is still moving air. A while back, I sat in a kitchen of an older Amish gentleman in Holmes County, Ohio. His name was Eli. It was a 95-degree August afternoon, and the air inside that kitchen was cool, still, and quiet. There was no machine running anywhere. I asked him about it, and he pointed at a small vent opening in the wall in the corner of the room. He said, "The ground is the cooler." That was the whole explanation. The pipe ran 40 feet through his garden, 4 feet down, and the air arrived in his kitchen about 20 degrees cooler than what was outside. Eli's house is not unusual, it is just preserved. Now here is the part that would make you angry. In 1947, the United States Department of Agriculture published Farmers Bulletin No. 1918, titled Ventilation of Farm Buildings. Inside that pamphlet, on page 19, there was a full section on underground air inlets. It described the configuration. It told you what depth to bury the pipe. It told you the diameter range. It told you the slope. It was no exaggeration, a complete blueprint for the same system the Amish were using, and the Germans had documented 50 years earlier. The federal government printed this pamphlet, distributed it through agricultural extension offices in all 48 states at the time, and sold it for 15 cents. Then in 1961, that bulletin was quietly pulled from circulation. Nobody banned it. Nobody held a press conference. It just stopped being reprinted. By 1965, the additive aisle of every hardware store in America was stocked with branded products that had nothing to do with the earth tube. And by 1980, fewer than 3% of American architecture programs taught passive cooling at all. An entire field of proven engineering went from federal government endorsement to total absence from professional education in about a generation. That is not an accident. That is a coordinated outcome. The first wall went up in 1902, when an engineer named Willis Carrier invented the modern mechanical air conditioner in a Brooklyn printing plant. By the 1920s, his company was running marketing campaigns that positioned passive cooling as primitive and air conditioning as the symbol of modern American progress. A 1930 Carrier Engineering Corporation manual dismissed earth contact cooling as suitable only for cellars and food storage. The marketing was the point. The technology was already known. The corporation just made sure the general public stopped thinking of it as a serious option. The second wall went up in 1927, when the first model mechanical building codes were written. VAC industry representatives sat heavily on the writing committees. By 1945, post-war American construction had been standardized around mechanical cooling. Passive systems did not fit the framework, so they got dropped from the code, which meant building inspectors stopped approving them, which meant contractors stopped installing them, which meant homeowners stopped knowing they existed. The third wall went up in 1980 when American architecture schools quietly dropped passive cooling from their core curricula. An architect graduating in 1985 could earn a 5-year degree from a top program without ever hearing the word cannot. The knowledge did not get debunked, it just stopped being passed down. And the fourth wall, the most recent one, went up in March of 2020. The American Gas Association held an internal planning meeting. The minutes from that meeting eventually became public through investigative reports, and inside the minutes, the association explicitly named passive thermal alternatives as, and I am quoting directly here, an existential threat to residential natural gas use. Their response was not to compete on the merits. Their response was to bury the alternative. Since 2020, the gas industry and its aligned trade groups have pushed preemption bills through more than 25 state legislatures. Those bills prevent cities and towns from encouraging or incentivizing passive thermal systems in their local building codes. Here is the detail that I cannot stop thinking about. When researchers ran the text of those state bills through plagiarism detection software, the results came back nearly identical. Same sentences, same definitions, same legal framing. Introduced by completely different legislators in Utah, Texas, Arizona, and Louisiana within weeks of each other. One Utah representative was asked directly where the language came from. His answer was that he did not write it. He said he became aware of the bill, quote, from his local gas supplier. So the gas supplier handed the bill to the legislator. The legislator filed it. It passed. And now in 25 states, the gas industry has rolled out coordinated legal infrastructure to make sure your local city government cannot help you build a cooling system that does not need gas or grid electricity. That is what is happening right now, while most American homeowners are paying around $740 per summer in extra electricity costs to run their air conditioning. Multiply that across roughly 90 million single-family homes, and you get a number close to $29 billion a year every year, paid by households for a cooling load that the dirt under their feet has already solved for free. Now, if you are still with me, I want to give you the part of this story that almost nobody finds, because this is the layer the title promised. There is a peer-reviewed study that came out of the Passive House Institute in Darmstadt, Germany. They monitored 847 residential earth tube installations across Central Europe starting in 2005. The performance data is honestly kind of insane. The average system delivered about 3.2 kilowatts of cooling capacity, which is roughly the same output as a mid-sized window air conditioner, except it pulled zero refrigerant and used about the same electricity as a single ceiling fan. The homes maintained interior temperatures between 72 and 75 degrees even when it was 95 outside. Average payback period was 12 years. After that, the cooling is essentially free for the rest of the building's life. In Austria, the National Building Standard actually requires thermal labyrinth analysis for any structure over 1,000 square meters. At the Allgemeines Krankenhaus Hospital in Vienna, which everyone just calls the AKH, an earth tube system has been delivering 450 kilowatts of cooling to critical care units since 1994. That is 30 straight years of continuous operation with cleaning required only every 5 to 7 years. Vienna built an earth tube into a major teaching hospital, and it has been working without drama since Bill Clinton's first term in office. In Switzerland, the Minergie certification program has documented data from over 200 earth tube installations, and a 15-year study from ETH Zurich, which is one of the top engineering schools in the world, found zero degradation in system performance across the entire monitoring window. The systems do not just hold their performance. There is field data showing that earth tubes actually get more efficient over the first 3 summers as the soil around the pipe settles into its long-term thermal profile. A compressor on a normal air conditioner starts dying the day you turn it on. An earth tube gets better, then it plateaus for the rest of its life, which is usually measured in decades. So the 900-year-old system the Persians built in Yazd, that the Romans built into their villas, that the Amish carried over from Germany in the early 1700s, and that European hospitals and government buildings are still installing right now in 2026. That system is the one your local building inspector cannot legally help you put in your own backyard in much of the United States. Not because it does not work. It works better than your central air. Not because it is dangerous. It is in active continuous use in a Vienna hospital. The only reason it is shut out is that nobody in the American HVAC industry would make $1 if you installed one. But the physics does not care about your zoning code. The dirt is still 55 degrees. The thermal lag still works. And once you understand what you are building, you can put it in your yard this weekend. Here is exactly how. You need about 40 to 60 feet of smooth wall PVC pipe in the 6 to 8 inch diameter range. That runs you somewhere between $60 and $90 at any hardware store. You want smooth wall, not corrugated, because corrugated pipe traps condensation, and that is how you grow mold inside the system. The smooth interior lets any water that condenses just slide down the slope and out. You also need a screened intake cap for the outdoor end, about $12 to $15. A simple inline duct fan rated for 100 to 300 cubic feet per minute, which is fan speak for how fast it moves air, costs about $40 to $60 and uses roughly the same electricity as a single LED light bulb. A small drain trap at the low end of the system around $8. a couple of pipe couplings and primer, another 20 or 30. You are at about $250 to $300 in parts for a system that will outlast every air conditioner you have ever owned. The labor is one weekend if you are physically competent. Rent a walk-behind trencher from any equipment yard. They run about $120 for a half day. The machine will cut a 4-foot deep trench through average suburban soil in about 2 hours. You drop the pipe in the trench at a 1-inch drop per 10 feet slope, which is just a little less than 1% grade. That slope is the single most important thing you do because it lets any condensation drain out instead of pooling. Pooled water inside a buried pipe is how you build a mold incubator. Sloped pipe drains clean and stays clean. The Europeans figured this out in the 1980s, and the science is settled. Run the pipe from a point at least 15 feet away from the house. Bring it up to ground level at the far end where you mount the intake cap, maybe a foot above the soil. Drop the indoor end into a return air duct on your existing forced air system if you have central air, or terminate it in a floor register in a main living room if you do not. The inline fan goes on the indoor end. You flip the switch, air starts flowing. In most parts of the country, on a 90-degree afternoon, you are going to see air coming out of that vent at around 60 to 65 degrees. That is a 25 to 30-degree drop with no compressor, no refrigerant, no monthly utility line item. If your home runs forced air central cooling, the earth tube pre-cools the air before your compressor ever fires, which means your compressor cycles way less often, which means your electric bill drops by something in the range of 25 to 40%. If you have window units, the earth tube delivers a steady stream of pre-cooled air to 1 or 2 rooms, and the window unit only has to handle the last few degrees of cooling. One thing I want to give you straight. In about half of American states, the building code does not have a category for an earth-air heat exchanger. It is not banned. It is unaddressed. That actually works in your favor because most jurisdictions classify a long outdoor air intake pipe as passive ventilation, which falls under a different code section that does not require the same scrutiny. The preemption bills I mentioned earlier mostly target cities and counties incentivizing this technology, not individual homeowners installing it. As always, check your local code. But the actual physical installation on your own property with no utility company involvement is something most homeowners can do under the radar of the people who would block it if they could. Radon is the one legitimate concern. The same dirt that cools your air is also where radon gas comes from in some parts of the country. Radon is just a naturally occurring gas that seeps up out of the ground in certain geographies, and you do not want it concentrating in your house. The solution is an activated charcoal canister at the indoor end of the system, about $40, replaced once a year. Independent lab testing shows that filter handles over 95% of radon transmission. Buy a continuous radon monitor for the mechanical room. Around $100. Check it. Live with peace of mind. That is the whole thing. $300 in parts. 1 weekend of work. 50-year design life. 0 monthly bills. And the same 55 degrees the Persians were pulling out of their qanats in Yazd in the year 1100 is now coming up into your living room in 2026. Listen, before you go, I want to be honest with you about something. The reason our channel exists is because knowledge like this got buried deliberately. There were specific decisions made by specific industries in specific years to make sure we Americans never connected the dots between the dirt under their lawn and their summer electric bill. Every time you watch a video like this one, make sure you share it with somebody else. That is one more household that stops paying $29 billion a year to a system that has been gaming us since the 1920s. And if you got something useful out of this one, hit subscribe so the next one finds you. It is the easiest way to keep the dirt cheap solutions ahead of the dollar expensive ones. Now, the next video I am putting out is about a $7 powder sitting on the shelf at any hardware store right now that has been documented in peer-reviewed research to drop the temperature of your roof by 30 degrees, which means your attic stops cooking the rooms below it, which means your air conditioner stops fighting a battle it cannot win. The Greeks figured it out 3,500 years ago. Purdue confirmed it in 2021. The industry buried it sometime in between. I will see you in that one.